Okay, so we have done our syllabus review, our iCollege tour, gone over the course assignments, and now we are going to go into chapter 1 and chapter 2 that we're going to be reading this week, and then your weekly checklist. So the first chapter that we are going to be reading is Intro into Educational Research. So here is a screenshot from my ebook, so you can see all the sections and the learning objectives from chapter 1. It's Introduction to Educational Research. So the main things that you are going to be learning about in this chapter are the general kinds of research: basic research, applied research, evaluation, action research, and orientational research. And these are going to be terms that you're going to see in your article critique, and you will likely talk about which approach you're using in your research proposal. So basic research is meant to contribute to our knowledge and theoretical understandings about the world. And so as you're reading the text, you'll see some examples of these, and you can comment if you have an idea as well. Now, applied research is based on specific questions that, particularly in education, might be research that we need to understand different pedagogies or learning techniques that we are using in the classroom. And applied research is meant for more immediate action, whereas basic research is more so theoretical, broad understanding. So you will be reading about both of those in chapter 1. Now, another type of research that is common in several fields and definitely in education is called program evaluation or evaluation research. And so there's several different types that the authors do a great job about talking about. So it might be evaluation of how something is being implemented in an educational space, or the impact or the efficiency of a particular program. So program evaluation is meant to be very practical and help organizations and institutions understand how their procedures are being carried out, what's working, what's not, and their effectiveness. Now, action research is something that practitioners do to help them understand, again, the effectiveness of things that they are doing in their practice. So this is something that teachers can do, principals can do, and practitioners in different industries can do as well. So action research is a very circular process where a practitioner tries something new, they collect data, they see if it works, and then they make adjustments, always working to be very inductive in improving their practice. So this is a cycle that teachers do often intuitively, but action research is making it using the science, using empiricism to help you make sure that those processes are identifying the things that you hope to identify. And then I'm biased. My favorite type of research is orientational research. And so orientational research is research that is guided by a particular theory to understand the world through a lens that is specific for an ideological position. So it might be based on standpoint, it might be based on critical theory, but orientational research makes known in the beginning that the researcher has a certain set of positions and beliefs about the world that are guiding and informing this research. So it could be activist research or research that is concerned with a particular group of people. And so that is what guides that research. Now over here, this is the research wheel that shows the different ways, and again, this is talked about in this chapter, the different modes that empiricism and scientific research is carried out. So some scientific research is more exploratory. It's exploring the different processes in the world by collecting observations and noticing systemic patterns to make some inferences about how things work the way they do or why they work the way they do. And then another type of research is confirmatory, where the researcher uses more experimental methods to find more causation or correlation between different variables that they might be manipulating. So here are, within those two approaches, those are both considered empirical research, both of those approaches. And here are some of the underpinnings that researchers have as they are designing these studies. So their theory, even if it's not orientational research, all researchers have theories that they use that help them understand their world, assumptions that they are making as they design their study. Their hypotheses, their predictions, and depending on the research that might tie into their theories as well. Then they have their observations, their data, and then they're noticing their patterns and their descriptions. So in chapter 1, you will get details and read examples of these. And in perusal, I'm interested to hear your ideas, your thoughts. I know I shared which type of research resonates with me. I mean, they all do, but I'm curious which type of research. You can put a comment in perusal. Which type of research are you most curious about and why? So that is chapter 1. Now, chapter 2 is called, it's an introduction to quantitative, qualitative, and mixed research. And we are going to go into depth more on in research design in modules 3, 4, and 5 about each of these, but this is a broad introductory overview of what these different paradigms mean. So here you can see again a screenshot of what my ebook looks like for chapter 2, the subsections and the learning objectives. And so here are those research paradigms, and this is going to be super important for you as you do your article critique and your research proposal. So I'm going to be asking you to identify the research design or the research paradigm that's being used. And there's 3 overarching methodological paradigms that researchers use. One is quantitative approach, another's is a qualitative approach, and then a mixed approach that draws from both. So like I mentioned, chapter 2 is going to give an overview of those, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about them here. So the first approach is a quantitative approach, and quantitative approaches include both experimental design and non-experimental design. And quantitative approaches, they are including variables, and they are focused on how one variable impacts the other. And so here in this concept chart, you can see different types of variables. There's quantitative variables that are numerical, things like test scores, things like age, things like income level. There's many different quantitative variables. Anything that can be quantified in terms of numbers would be considered a quantitative variable. There's also categorical variables. Categorical variables might be things like the school that they go to, a geographic location, rural versus urban, race, ethnicity, gender, age. Oh, well, I guess age would be quantitative, but categorical would be like gender, race, ethnicity, religious orientation. So both of these variables, both categorical and quantitative, are included in quantitative research. And based on the specific design, researchers are able to perform different analyses and plan different studies based on those. So as you're reading chapter 2, the authors go into depth about these different types of variables and different techniques that researchers have when they are identifying which variables they are going to use. So the next type of, so those are the variables. So I'm going to talk a little bit about experimental research. Now, experimental research is, it's the most rigorous type of research if you are trying to make hypotheses and predictions about causation and determining what the outcomes of and prediction. So if you are trying to determine whether or not an educational curriculum predicts increased student achievement, in order to be confident and have rigorous research that supports a prediction or causal relationship, you need to have experimental research. But it's also the most rare because of some of the requirements that make it very difficult in settings that involve people, like education. So in experimental research, you have 2 groups. and you are keeping everything the same except your independent variable. So you'll be reading about that. So the independent variable is something that you are changing from one group to another. So in education, it could be something like an after-school program. So there might be two groups of kids, they each go to an after-school program, but only one group is using this specific program. And then the dependent variable is when you are measuring outcomes. It could be something like academic achievement, it could be something like a rating scale, something that's more social emotional learning, could be outcomes like college graduation, so many different options. But in order for it to be experimental research, researchers have to make sure that they are controlling for any extraneous variables, that they are making sure that the populations are represented, or that their samples are representative of the population. So there are many different considerations that researchers have to keep in mind when planning experimental research to make sure that it will be reflective of a hypothesis that either predicts or doesn't predict a more causal relationship. So all experimental research is quantitative design, but non-experimental research is also quantitative design. And so in non-experimental research, you do see quite a bit of this in education. You don't have to have this manipulation of the independent variable. So you are able to do this a little bit more realistically, but you are not able to determine causation, but you're more so leaning towards prediction. So you are looking at things like correlation, and you are predicting whether or not one variable is correlated with another. So there's a lot of studies that are looking at different reading pedagogies to see if this particular approach to teaching reading is correlated with increased student achievement. A lot of the educational products and salespeople they're using data from likely non-experimental research to show the correlation between different variables. And it could be both quantitative variables, it could be a categorical variable with a quantitative variable. There's different ways that researchers can design these that we are going to talk more about. And then another type is qualitative. And so qualitative approaches, they can, of course, use quantitative data, but they are looking at more so qualitative data sources. And by qualitative, I mean data sources that include information that is written, spoken, or visual. So things like interviews. A researcher might interview a teacher about their perspectives. And so the research transcript would be the data that they are using to analyze. It might be something like an actual curriculum. When they look at the book or the pages of the book, the images that are included, and they come up with a systematic way of analyzing text. That's a technique that I use a lot called discourse analysis. That is a qualitative approach when researchers, they're not worried about identifying a relationship between two variables, but they are looking at large volumes of data, normally text, images, both, and they have a systemic way of analyzing that data to identify patterns. So as you are reading chapter 2, they're going to give a brief overview of some of the qualitative approaches, and you are going to be reading a lot more of that as we get to that later as well. And then another approach, I guess I don't have that in here. Another approach is mixed research that uses some techniques from quantitative design and then some techniques for qualitative design. So an example of that might be something like a researcher is studying a reading program. And so they are looking at how that program correlates to student achievement scores, maybe on the state standardized test. But then they want to also corroborate those findings with some interviews. So they interview maybe teachers about their opinions about the program, and they get some qualitative data, meaning long text and experiences that come from the people themselves, where they talk about what they liked about the program, what they thought worked, and shed some more light on that correlation that they may have identified. So I'm curious, so again, when you look at the research paradigms, which one seems to resonate with you at this point, or what questions do you have about those? So that is what you are going to be doing in chapter 2. So here is your week 1 checklist. So by Sunday, August 28th, I want you to do your introduction slide on Google Slide, and then do your perusal number 1, and you have an optional Zoom discussion. I should have also put read chapter 1 and 2, but you do need to read chapter 1 and 2 in order to do that perusal. So let me show you the Google slide, and then I will say goodbye for. Okay, so this is the introduction assignment. So this is on iCollege. It will take you to a Google slide. So there are blank slides. Choose one for you. You can put your name, and you can edit your text any way that you like to share any information with the class. You can put your email, things that you like, research interests, pictures, just so I can get to know you and your classmates can get to know you. So this will be something that we will all be working on, and you can click through and you can look at your classmate slides. You can also enter a comment if you have something in common with somebody, or if you recognize someone and you want to say hi. I know that I already recognize a few people in the course, so I'm looking to see your introductory slides so I can leave you a comment and get to know you. So again, here is mine. You can get to know a little bit more about me here. You can see my parents. Here are some students, my advisor, some of my research interests, and some of the things that I like to do. I love watching YouTube, as you can see. That's why I put my lectures onto YouTube. And then I also teach 3rd grade. So this is just an example, and I'm looking to get to know you. And here's my email again, if you have any questions for me. And I might see you Thursday. And if I don't see you Thursday, I will see you online. Take care. Bye-bye.